When learning the basics of screenplay structure, writers generally talk about stories having three acts, with a turning point at the end of Act 1 and Act 2. Although it's important to understand how these two plot points work to propel your story forward, there are really 5 major plot points that dictate the full structure of your story: the inciting incident, the lock-in, the first culmination or midpoint, the main culmination, and the third act twist. These 5 points are moments that change the thrust of your story, turning it in dynamic ways, often setting your protagonist down a new path or changing their objective. There are exceptions to every rule, but understanding how to use these 5 moments to help you build the necessary turning points in your script can be key. The inciting incident occurs in the middle of the first act and the end of your first sequence. It is the first moment that shakes up the status quo. Up to now, your protagonist has existed in their own world, but at this point in the story, a new door is open to your character. And even though the protagonist hasn't stepped through the threshold, we understand that they will ultimately have to go through this door in order to achieve their main objective. In the 1967 classic The Graduate, Mrs. Robinson asks Ben, a recent college graduate, to give her a ride home, where she convinces him to come inside her house and then attempts to seduce him, standing in front of him naked, saying she's available to him anytime as he nervously tries to escape the room. At this point, Ben has not entered into a relationship with Mrs. Robinson. However, the door has been opened to that very opportunity. We still have more to come in the first act, but we won't be surprised when he makes the call and begins the affair. The lock-in is the moment at which your protagonist can no longer return to the status quo, and backing out is impossible. Often the character is literally locked up with handcuffs, stranded, or abducted. The door, which was open to the protagonist earlier at the inciting incident, now slams closed behind your character, which not only establishes your protagonist's objective, but also propels them forward into the second act. In The Matrix, Neo meets Morpheus, who explains the Matrix is a false reality that was constructed to hide the truth, that Neo is a slave, like everyone else, born into bondage. Morpheus holds out 2 pills. If Neo takes the blue pill, he'll wake up in his bed and believe whatever he wants. But if he takes the red pill, he'll stay in Wonderland, and Morpheus will show him how deep the rabbit hole goes. Neo takes the red pill. Clearly, Neo is now locked in. There is no going back. He has liberated himself from the false reality of the Matrix, forced now to live as a free human being. Yet he has no choice but to join the resistance and fight against the big machines that have oppressed the human race. About halfway through every screenplay, your protagonist achieves their first major success or failure. When the midpoint is a success, it's an achievement of a smaller goal on the road to the main objective that swings the balance of the story in the protagonist's favor. Alternatively, when this culmination is a failure, it moves your protagonist even farther from their objective. In other words, if the story is a tragedy, the midpoint will mirror the ultimate failure in the end, or an ultimate success if the ending is a happy one. In the 1994 film Forrest Gump, Forrest accidentally ends up on the stage as part of an anti-war rally and is asked to speak to thousands of people filling the National Mall. Even though the microphone cuts out during his speech, Jenny hears his name and yells out from the crowd. Forrest and Jenny run to each other, reuniting in the reflecting pool to the cheers of thousands. Despite all of his other accomplishments, this is the high point in Forrest's life to date. Because in the end, all he really ever wants is Jenny. She was lost, but now she's found. And this high point mirrors Forrest's success at the end of the film. The main culmination can be thought of as the climax of the film, representing the pinnacle of your protagonist's journey. It is the highest or lowest point for your protagonist thus far, usually represented through a major success or failure that brings your character's second act objective to a close and propels them towards a new goal in the third act. In The Shawshank Redemption, with new information to prove his innocence, Andy Dufresne asks Warden Norton to help him get another trial, assuring Norton that he won't reveal the money laundering schemes that he set up for him. but Norton reacts by throwing Andy in solitary confinement. Now, not only is Andy refused the opportunity to prove his innocence, but in the immediate aftermath of this scene, Norton lures Tommy, the only inmate who can testify in Andy's behalf, to his death. This is the lowest low for Andy Dufresne. He really is an innocent man, and now he has no hope to ever breathe the air beyond Shawshank Prison. The third act twist occurs approximately halfway between the main culmination and the end of your story, usually between sequences 7 and 8. It is the monkey wrench thrown into the protagonist's path to achieving their third act objective, a moment that changes the character's trajectory in the final act. It differs from other minor twists because it actually changes the plot. In Scorsese's film Goodfellas, Henry meets his best friend Jimmy in a diner, only to realize that Jimmy plans on having him killed. This unexpected turn of events then forces Henry to cut a deal with authorities where he rats on his friends and enters the witness protection program. As you can see, the 5 major plot points are the building blocks behind 3-act structure and sequence construction. Mapping out these points early in your screenplay development process will go a long way to help navigate the writing of your script. To learn more about plot points, sequences, and acts, check out thescriptlab.com.